In the cold, unforgiving vacuum of space where nebulae bloom and die like spectral flowers over millennia, there are worlds that know only silence. They are spheres of dust and rock orbiting dead suns, their surfaces scoured by the solar winds of forgotten stars. They are unremarkable, passed over by prospectors and conquerors alike, dismissed as barren graveyards in a galaxy teeming with life. And in this, the galaxy is catastrophically, biblically wrong. For these are not graveyards, they are sleeping kingdoms, they are tombs. Beneath the silent, shifting sands under continents of rust-red dust and mountains of obsidian glass, something stirs. It is not a biological awakening, not the gentle unfurling of life after a long winter. It is the cold, inexorable hum of resurrection. A wave of energy, silent and unseen, washes through the planet's core, activating protocols that have lain dormant for 60 million years. Deep within the geometric perfection of the necropolis, lumens of emerald green begin to glow, casting long, haunting shadows down corridors that have known only absolute darkness since the dawn of the Eldari race. Imagine the sight. Sarcophagi of living metal intricately carved with the histories of a forgotten dynasty slide open with a hiss of displaced atmosphere. Within there is no mummified flesh, no ceremonial armor cladding brittle bones. There is only the gleam of necrodermis, the perfect, seamless form of a machine built for eternity. An arm impossibly thin and jointed with a precision no mortal hand could craft raises itself from the sarcophagus, its fingers tipped with claws that could shred ceramite flecks slowly. And then the eyes deep within a passionless metal skull ignite with that same baleful green light. One by one, legion by legion, an army of the dead rises not from soil, but from stasis. As they emerge, their silent footfalls leaving no prints in the ancient dust, a voice echoes across the void. It is a voice not of sound, but of thought, of cosmic contemplation. What is the nature of a soul? Is it a measurable energy, a quantum signature woven into the flesh? Or is it something more? The capacity for joy, for sorrow, for ambition, for despair. And what happens when it is stripped away? When the flawed, fragile, gloriously vibrant vessel of biology is cast into the fire and the consciousness within is poured into a shell of unending metal. Is that life? Or is it merely an echo trapped in a perfect, eternal prison? To the myriad races of the 41st millennium, the answer is simple, born of terror and bloodshed. To the Imperium of man, they are the soulless legions, the Xenos horrors of a bygone age, a mindless tide of steel and gorse fire that seeks only to extinguish the light of humanity. To the Asuriani, they are the ancient enemy, the authors of their downfall, a chilling reminder of a war that shattered the heavens. To the Orcs, they are simply a gud scrap, tough metal beakies that put up a satisfying fight before being stomped to bits. In all these views, there is a common comforting thread that the Necrons are automata, puppets of forgotten gods, slaves to a central command, their actions devoid of will, their goals as simple and brutal as a headsman's axe. But this is a lie, a profound galactic-scale misunderstanding. To look upon a Necron legion advancing in eerie lockstep silence and see only machines is to miss the terrifying tragedy at their very core. The silence is not the absence of thought, it is the absence of the ability to scream. Within each metal shell, behind each pair of glowing optic lenses, resides the ghost of a being, a consciousness clipped and constrained by command protocols, eroded by the unimaginable aeons of slumber, but a consciousness nonetheless. It is the faint, residual memory of a life lived in flesh, of breathing air, under a cruel, dying sun, of feeling fear and love, and most of all, a burning, gnawing jealousy for those who lived longer, better lives. Theirs is not the cold, clean logic of a machine. It is the infinite, patient suffering of a soul that remembers having a soul and knows it can never have one again. This fundamental truth is the key to understanding their purpose. For if they are not mindless machines, then what do they truly desire? The answer is not one, but a million fractured contradictory ambitions, a grand and terrible cosmic chess game being played out by beings who have had 60 million years to ponder their next move. The Great Sleep. Their self-imposed hibernation was not a perfect preservation. Time, like a slow-moving river, has eroded their minds. Some have awakened with their intellects intact, their ancient personalities burning as coldly as ever. Others have succumbed to madness, their command protocols corrupted into grotesque parodies of their original function. And still others have degraded into little more than the automatons the galaxy mistakes them for. From this fractured awakening, a war of philosophies has erupted in the silent courts of the tomb worlds. It is a conflict that will shape the destiny of the entire Milky Way. Is their ultimate goal the reversal of their terrible curse, a grand project to reclaim the biological forms they were tricked into sacrificing, to once again feel the warmth of a sun on their skin and the beat of a heart in their chest? Or is it the cold, logical pursuit of empire? To finish the war, they started 60 million years ago to impose a final, silent, metallic order upon the chaotic, fleshy species that have inherited their galaxy. Perhaps it is something more esoteric, a mad archivist's desire to curate and collect the last dying moments of the universe, or a broken god-slayer's quest to achieve true divinity himself. Or is it the simplest, most terrifying goal of all, to extinguish the flame of all life, to render the galaxy as silent and dead as their own barren hearts, a final act of spite against a universe that has allowed them to exist, but not to live? The truth is, there is no single Necron goal. There is a spectrum of desires, from tragic salvation to nihilistic oblivion. And in the silent, calculating minds of their overlords, in the Byzantine machinations of their cryptex, and in the silent march of their immortal legions, the fate of every living thing is being weighed, measured, and decided. Theirs is a legacy written in the language of silence, and their final ambition will be the universe's last eulogy. To comprehend the bargain that cost them their souls, one must first journey back across the gulf of 60 million years, to a time before the Imperium, before the Eldari Empire, before humanity had even dreamed of fire. One must witness the genesis of their sorrow, the civilization known as the Necrontyr. Their story does not begin with a bang, but with a cough, a wheezing breath drawn in pain under the relentless gaze of a malevolent sun. Their homeworld was a place of radiological torment, a planet cursed from its very formation, orbiting a star that bathed it not in life-giving warmth, but in stellar flares and tides of ionizing radiation. This was the crucible of the Necrontyr, and it forged them into a people defined by one singular, inescapable truth: the utter brevity and fragility of life. From the moment of their birth, the Necrontyr were dying. Their flesh was riddled with cancers, their bodies host to a litany of genetic maladies that turned their short lives into a protracted struggle against their own biology. In response, they turned their prodigious intellects towards defiance. Their technology was a marvel, a testament to a will forged in desperation. They built cities of sterile geometric beauty, vast metropolises shielded from their star's poisonous light. They erected funerary monuments so vast they scraped the toxic heavens, tombs designed to be far more permanent and glorious than the fleeting lives of those they were built to house. Their society was a cult of morbidity. Dynasties were measured not by the accomplishments of the living, but by the grandeur of their dead. Their art depicted not the joys of existence, but the stoic acceptance of its end. They became masters of stasis technology, cryogenics, and cybernetic augmentation, all in a desperate, clawing attempt to add a few more precious years, months, or even weeks to their cursed lifespans. They conquered the stars in slow, lumbering tomb ships, seeking new worlds, not out of a desire for exploration, but for escape. Yet the curse was in their very genes. No matter how far they fled, the shadow of the grave stretched before them. They were a people of brilliant, bitter, and dying geniuses, trapped in a cosmic prison of their own flesh. It was during their expansion across the cold darkness of the galaxy that they encountered a truth that would transform their bitterness into a galaxy-spanning rage. They discovered they were not alone. There were others, beings of immense power, ancient beyond reckoning, who called themselves the Old Ones. They were everything the Necronta were not. Where the Necronta were frail, the Old Ones were robust. Where the Necronta were sterile, the Old Ones were the galaxy's great gardeners, seeding life on 1,000,000 worlds. And most damningly of all, where the Necronta lived and died in the blink of a cosmic eye, the Old Ones were for all practical purposes immortal. They had mastered the strange, chaotic dimension of psychic energy, known as the warp drawing, from it the power to shape reality, to travel instantly between stars, and to grant themselves lives that spanned geological ages. To the Necronta, the existence of the Old Ones was not a wonder, but an intolerable insult. It was a confirmation of the universe's fundamental injustice. They saw the Old Ones' casual mastery over life and time not as a natural state, but as a treasure being hoarded. Why should they, the Necrontia, suffer under a dying sun while these others basked in eternal light? Why should they be shackled to rotting flesh while the Old Ones danced through the stars in bodies that never failed? Their envy was a cold, hard thing, a diamond of perfect hatred formed under the immense pressure of their collective misery. They petitioned the Old Ones, begging, then demanding the secret to their longevity. The Old Ones, seeing the bitterness in their hearts and the darkness that clung to their civilization, refused. It was this refusal that lit the fuse. The Necrontia united for the first time in their history by a single burning purpose declared war. A war not for territory, not for resources, but against mortality itself. A war against the gods who had denied them paradise. This was the beginning of the war in heaven, a conflict that would burn brighter and hotter than any the galaxy had ever known, a war born from the spite of a dying people. The war in heaven was a cataclysm that consumed galaxies. Yet for all their technological might and cold-blooded resolve, the Necronta were losing. They were being systematically exterminated. Their implacable legions were potent, their Goss weaponry capable of stripping a creature to its component atoms in a flash of emerald light. But they could not win a war of attrition against an enemy that could create entire warrior races like the mighty Krork and the psychically agile Eldari. The Old One's mastery of the warp was a weapon against which the Necrontia had no defense. Their battle lines were broken by sorcerous storms, their fleets swallowed by manufactured reality rifts. Every Necrontia soldier that fell was a loss millions of years in the making. For the Old Ones, a replacement was simply a matter of creation. Pushed back to their core worlds, their empire shattered, and their people facing the bitter irony of extinction in their quest for eternal life, the Necrontia grew desperate. And in their desperation, they turned their gaze from the stars between and instead looked into the very heart of the stars themselves. Their deepest void probes and stellar observatories, instruments of incredible power and sensitivity, had long registered anomalies within the photospheres of certain stars. They had catalogued vast ethereal beings that swam in the plasma of suns, creatures of pure energy that defied all known physical laws. The Necrontia had dismissed them as natural phenomena, beasts of the cosmic ecosystem. But now, driven by the need for a weapon, any weapon against the Old Ones, they looked again. Their analysis of their own hateful sun revealed a terrifying truth. It was being consumed, drained of its energy by a vast parasitic consciousness. It was not one, but a pantheon of these star vampires, whom the Necrontia would come to call the Satan, or star gods. They were beings of unimaginable antiquity, born in the fiery crucible of creation itself. They were mindless, formless, and ravenously hungry. They were gods of the material universe, just as the old ones were gods of the psychic Imperium. And in this the Necrontyr saw not a threat, but a symmetry, an opportunity, an ally born of cosmic necessity. In an act of supreme technological hubris, the Necrontyr sought to communicate. They knew these ethereal beings could not comprehend them, so they would give them forms to facilitate understanding. They forged bodies of living metal necrodermis, the same material they used for their ships and cities. These shells were beautiful humanoid effigies designed to appeal to a god's vanity. They broadcast a signal and offering into the heart of their sun. And the gods came. The C'tan, drawn by the lure of contained energy and the novelty of a physical form, poured their vast consciousnesses into the metal shells. For the first time, they experienced sensation individuality and the finite universe in a way their eternal, formless existence had never allowed. They were grateful. One among them was more cunning than the rest. His name was Mephitran the Messenger, and he saw in the desperate, hate-filled minds of the Necrontyr a perfect instrument for his own burgeoning ambitions. As the other C'tan rampaged, reveling in their newfound power, Mephitran spoke to Sharek, the Silent King, ruler of all Necrontyr dynasties. His voice was not sound, but a wave of pure, seductive logic imprinted upon their minds. He did not offer them victory. He offered them their heart's desire, the end of the curse that had plagued them since the dawn of their race. You fight a war you cannot win. The deceiver projected his metallic form, shimmering with captured starlight. You rage against the dying of the light, but your flesh is weak, your time is short. Your disunity is your downfall. Your mortality is your damnation. The old ones offer you only extinction. We offer you a final peace. We offer you unity. An end to the petty squabbles of your dynasties, an end to the rebellion of the flesh. We will make you one people, with one will and one purpose. And we offer you the gift you have sought across 1,000,000 suns. We offer you immortality. Cast off these fragile shells of meat and bone. Let us craft for you new bodies of eternal shining metal. You will never know sickness. You will never know pain. You will never know death. Join us as our army, our chosen people, and together we will burn the old ones from the heavens and gift you an ordered, silent, and eternal galaxy to rule. This is our covenant, your service for your salvation. The promise was a perfect poison, crafted specifically for the Necrontyr soul. It addressed every fear, every resentment, every bitter ambition they possessed. Sharek, the Silent King, looked upon the last remnants of his people. He saw the endless rows of tombs, he felt the ticking clock of his own mortality, and he saw the encroaching fleets of the old ones. The C'tan's offer was monstrous. It was a Faustian bargain on a species-wide scale, but it was the only path he could see that did not end in the utter annihilation of the Necrontyr. With the fate of his entire civilization resting on his decision, the Silent King agreed to the covenant. The pact was sealed. The Necrontyr had found their gods, and in doing so had pronounced their own doom. The covenant was made, and the star gods wasted no time in claiming their due. Across the Necrontyr Empire, great biofurnaces were constructed machines on a planetary scale that blackened the skies with their esoteric energies. They were not presented as instruments of death, but as cradles of rebirth. The Silent King, now a vessel for the C'tan's will, decreed that the time of flesh was over. The time of weakness, of disease, of death was at an end. The hour of their ascension had arrived, and his people, exhausted by war and seduced by the promise of eternity, believed him. In their billions they came, processions of the hopeful and the dying, marching in solemn lines towards the light of the great forges. They saw not an abattoir, but a temple. They heard not a death knell, but a hymn of apotheosis. It was the greatest act of self-deception in the history of the galaxy. Imagine the scene from the perspective of a single Necrontyr warrior, his body riddled with the tumors that were his birthright, his breath shallow, but his spirit buoyed by the promise of the king. He steps into the chamber of light, a place of humming machinery and impossible geometry. He is told this is not an end but a transformation. A Satan, a shimmering god of captured starlight, watches over the proceedings with a gaze that is neither benevolent nor malevolent, but simply hungry. The warrior closes his eyes, thinking of the ancestors he will now outlive for all time. Then the process begins. It is not a gentle transfer. It is an act of supreme violence. A storm of emerald energy engulfs him, and in a single agonizing instant his world is unmade. The flesh he has known, the pain he has endured, the very air in his lungs, it is all burned away, atomized, rendered down to constituent particles, and discarded as waste. His consciousness, his very being, is flayed from its biological anchor. It is a scream that has no voice, a moment of terror so absolute it transcends all physical sensation. It is the feeling of being read, copied, and deleted all at once. His soul, that ineffable spark of emotion, memory, and self, is shredded and consumed, a final delicious morsel for the waiting star gods. What remains is a mere echo, a ghost of data which is then poured like molten metal into a waiting shell of necrodermis. And then, nothing. Silence. An absolute, profound, and terrifying silence. This was the moment of awakening. The Necrontyr warrior stands once more, but he is no longer Necrontyr. He is Necron. His new body is perfect. It feels no pain. It knows no fatigue. It will never age, never sicken, never die. The gift of immortality has been given. But the price, the terrible, unmentioned price, has been paid. He tries to feel triumph, but there is no mechanism for joy. He tries to feel relief from his lifelong pain, but there is no concept of comfort. He looks at his comrades, their new bodies gleaming in the eerie green light, and he feels no camaraderie, no kinship. There is only the cold, clear stream of data flowing into his mind, the identity of his commanding lord, the tactical specifications of his gas flare, and the overriding, unshakable protocol to obey. His name, his family, his life before the forge. These things are gone, ghosts of a life that no longer matters. He and the countless billions like him have been reduced to little more than extensions of their master's will. They are the true soulless machines the galaxy would come to fear. For the nobility, the lords and overlords, the process was more refined, the loss less absolute, but perhaps more cruel. They retained their intellect, their ambition, their strategic genius, and the full memory of their prior lives. Yet the apparatus of emotion was gone. They remembered love for their dynasty, but could no longer feel it. They recalled the burning sting of hatred for the old ones, but it was now just a cold, logical directive. They were ghosts in their own skulls, forever haunted by the memory of a warmth they could never again experience. Their torment was to be fully aware of what they had lost, to be eternal spectators of their own hollow existence. But the full, undiluted horror of the moment was reserved for one being alone, Zarek, the last silent king. As per his agreement with the Satan, he was the last to undergo biotransference, using the most sophisticated processes, preserving his consciousness and will entirely intact. He was to be the eternal ruler of a united and immortal race. He awoke his mind, clear his body, a masterpiece of living metal. He looked out from his command throne, expecting to hear the triumphant roar of his reborn people. Instead, he was met with a silence that was deeper and more complete than the vacuum of space. The chaotic, vibrant hum of billions of living minds had been replaced by a void. He saw his legions ranked in perfect silent order, their eyes glowing with cold green fire. They were his people, but they were also utterly alien. They were echoes, husks. He reached out with his will, and they obeyed without question, without hesitation, without thought. They were his slaves, and he in turn was a slave to the Satan, who now feasted upon the spiritual energy his people had shed. In that moment of perfect clarity, Zarek understood. He had not led his people to salvation. He had orchestrated their damnation. He had committed the greatest genocide in cosmic history, and his own people were the victims. His was an agony of regret so profound it would fuel his actions for the next 60 million years, a silent scream of failure in the cold, dead center of his own immortal soul. With the old ones shattered and their fledgling races scattered to the winds, the war in heaven was over. A dead quiet fell across the galaxy, a silence punctuated only by the triumphant proclamations of the Citan. Now masters of reality, the star gods turned their cosmic power towards petty cruelties and decadent displays of vanity. They saw the Necrons not as allies, but as property, their eternal legions of slaves. They demanded monuments built from dying stars and tributes of planetary cores. Their arrogance was boundless, their foresight blinded by victory. They did not notice the cold, calculating silence of their chief slave, the Silent King. Zarek had watched their every move, his silent agony having long ago cooled into a single, diamond-hard purpose vengeance. He saw the Citan weakened by their long war, distracted by their own infighting. And he knew his soulless legions were the perfect weapon for a rebellion born of cold logic. A machine cannot be intimidated by a god. A slave protocol can be rewritten. The moment of betrayal was absolute, executed with the silent, flawless precision of a machine. One moment the Necron Legion stood as an honor guard for their Citan masters. The next, every Gorse cannon in the Empire was turned upon them. The star gods' beings who had feasted on the hearts of suns and unmade reality with a whim were caught completely by surprise. But this was no simple battle. It was deicide on a galactic scale. The Necrons under Zarek's secret direction for millennia had built weapons specifically for this day. They unleashed technologies of impossible power tools designed not merely to kill, but to unmake the very laws of physics that gave the Citan form. Cannons fired blasts of contained singularity, focused beams of entropy, aged swathes of a Citan's form to nothingness in an instant, and esoteric energies were deployed to attack their very nature as beings of the material universe. The Citan fought back with the power of dying galaxies, but they were overwhelmed. They could not be killed, for they were as fundamental to reality as gravity or electromagnetism. But they could be broken. One by one, the star gods were shattered, their infinite consciousnesses fractured into millions of shrieking, maddened shards. Each shard, still possessing a measure of its former godly power, was then captured and bound within a tesseract labyrinth, a multidimensional prison from which not even a god could escape. The slaves had become the masters. The Necron Empire was now the sole ruler of a battered and silent galaxy. But for Zarek, the victory was ashes in his mouth. His vengeance was complete, but it had not healed his people. It had not returned their souls. He looked out upon his empire and saw only the monuments to his eternal guilt. He also saw with the cold clarity of a machine that they could not hold their new throne. The Eldari, bereft of their creators, but possessing a vast psychic potential, were now in ascendance. He knew a new galactic power would rise, and his own empire, weary from 2 galaxy-spanning wars, was too weak to endure another. More importantly, he understood that the galaxy in its current state held no cure for their condition. The path to reversing the biotransference, to undoing his great sin, was not yet visible. A new strategy was needed, one played out over a timescale that only true immortals could contemplate. So the Silent King issued his final command. From his throne, he sent a decree to every tomb world, every dynasty, every last Necron in his empire. The Great Sleep. Their work was done for now. Their cities were to be transformed into great stasis crypts. Their armies were to be interred. Their entire civilization was to enter a state of hibernation to wait out the long millennia. They would sleep until the galaxy evolved, until new forms of life arose, that just might hold the biological key to restoring their flesh and soul. It was a plan of unimaginable patience, a final desperate gamble for salvation. And in a last stunning act of penance, Zarek destroyed the command protocols that gave him absolute control over the Necron race. He could no longer force his will upon them. When they awoke, their destiny would be their own. Having given his people back the only thing he could, a fractured and hollow free will, the Silent King turned his great vessel away from his sleeping empire and set a course for the black, starless void between galaxies. He began a self-imposed exile, a lonely pilgrimage of 60 million years to atone for his sin and to search for any hope, any sign that his people could one day truly live again. And behind him, the lights of the Necron Empire went out one by one until only silence remained. For 60 million years, Zarek, the last Silent King, journeyed through the absolute nothingness of the intergalactic void. His exile was a penance of unimaginable scale, a solitary vigil in a darkness so complete it made the blackest tomb seem ablaze with light. He watched galaxies be born and die from afar, observed phenomena that would shatter the sanity of lesser beings, and contemplated the cosmic ruin he had brought upon his own kind. His search was twofold for a glimmer of hope, some alien science or biological miracle that might hold the key to undoing his great sin, and for atonement, a punishment that could match the scale of his crime. In the cold, starless dark, he found neither. Instead, he found something far, far worse. He found the Great Devourer. It was a shadow moving against the faint glow of the Milky Way, a silent, screaming tide of pure, ravenous life. From his vessel, Zarek observed the Tyranids. He saw not a fleet, but a singular organism of continental size, a predator that moved with a unified, soulless purpose. He watched them descend upon small satellite galaxies, and he saw the utter biological totality of their conquest. They did not conquer. They consumed. They stripped worlds bare, drinking the oceans, breathing the atmosphere, and rendering every single strand of organic matter, from the most humble microbe to the most advanced civilization, into nutrient slurry. They left behind nothing but dead rock scoured clean of all biological potential. And in that moment of cold, analytical observation, Zarek's 60-million-year-old mission of penance was shattered and replaced by a new, terrifying urgency. The Tyranids were not just another alien threat. They were the death of his only hope. His grand, patient plan to wait for the galaxy to seed new life, to cultivate a species that could serve as a template for his people's rebirth, was now threatened by a force that would devour the entire garden. The galaxy had to be saved not out of any sense of altruism, but because it was the last and only laboratory in which a cure for the Necron condition could be found. His exile was over. The king had to return. Zarek's arrival in the 41st Millennium was not to a unified sleeping empire ready to awaken at his command. He returned to a kingdom in ruins. The Great Sleep had been a flawed hibernation. Some tomb worlds had malfunctioned, becoming charnel houses of degraded, mindless constructs. Others had awakened prematurely, their overlords driven mad by the long silence or the corruption of their own engrams. The unity for which he had sacrificed everything was gone, replaced by 1,000,000 fractured goals. Petty tyrants ruled over single systems, obsessed with building statues of themselves out of captured starships. Mad archivists sought to catalogue the galaxy's dying moments, and entire dynasties had succumbed to nihilistic cults of pure destruction. His empire was a madhouse of bickering, insane, and dangerously powerful demigods. Faced with this fractured reality and the existential threat of the Tyranids, Zarek formulated a new grand strategy, a vision for the future he called the Great Reversal. It was a plan of 3 stages each, a task of monumental proportions. First, reunification. He would bring the Necron race back under a single banner. His banner. He began to travel the galaxy, his royal chariot appearing unbidden in the courts of rebellious overlords. He used diplomacy, ancient oaths of fealty, and the sheer undeniable weight of his authority as the last silent king to bring his wayward children back into the fold. And where logic and history failed, the silent, overwhelming force of his own legions provided the necessary persuasion. Second, the war in the silence. He would rally his reunified race against the Great Devourer. The Tyranid threat was the perfect catalyst, a common enemy so absolute in its destructive potential that even the maddest of overlords could understand the need for a united front. The Necrons would become the galaxy's silent shield, halting the biological tide with their lifeless metal bodies. Third and finally, the Great Work. Once the Tyranids were contained and the galaxy was secured under Necron dominion, the true goal could be pursued. The Silent King would harness the full unified intellect of the Cryptex and the resources of a subjugated galaxy to finally definitively find a way to reverse the biotransference, to create new organic bodies for his people and somehow, someway find a method to restore the souls they had lost. This was his vision, a path that led through unification and war to the ultimate salvation of his race. To achieve this, Zarek initiated a plan of staggering ambition and terrifying consequence, the creation of the Pariah Nexus. Using his unmatched knowledge of Noctilith or Blackstone, he began activating vast pylons across entire sectors of space. These pylons working in concert project a null field, a zone of absolute psychic silence that severs the connection between the material universe and the turbulent sea of the warp. Within the Nexus, the power of chaos is strangled, demonic incursions fail, and the sorcery of Psychers gutters and dies. But its effect is far more insidious. For any living creature with a soul, the Nexus is a slow poison. It leeches away emotion, passion, and faith. It instills a creeping, gnawing despair that eventually blossoms into utter apathy and compliance. It is a weapon that doesn't kill the body, but methodically starves the soul until nothing is left but a docile, obedient husk. In Zarek's grand design, this is a necessary evil, a tool of benevolent tyranny. He is imposing the crushing silence of the Necron condition upon the galaxy itself, creating a vast, ordered and controlled environment free from the chaos of the warp and the unpredictable passions of the lesser races. It is a cage built around 1,000 star systems, a silent kingdom where his great work can proceed unhindered. For the Silent King, this is the path to redemption. For the rest of the galaxy, it is the coming of a new and terrible dark age, a future not of fire and war, but of absolute, soul-crushing silence. While the Silent King pursues his grand and tragic quest for redemption, not all of his newly awakened subjects share his vision. For many of the great Pharaon and overlords, 60 million years of slumber has not instilled a sense of guilt, but has instead burned away all sentimentality, leaving only the cold, hard calculus of power. No figure embodies this pragmatic and ruthless worldview more than Imhotep, the Stormlord Pharaon of the mighty Sautek dynasty. When Imhotep awoke from the great sleep, he did not gaze upon the galaxy with sorrow for his people's lost souls. He gazed upon it with the disgusted eye of a master strategist viewing a sloppily played game of regicide. He saw a galaxy in chaos overrun by noisy, fleshy, inefficient vermin. He saw the sprawling, superstitious Imperium of man, the brutish, anarchic orcs, the fleeting, arrogant Aeldari, and the all-consuming tide of the Tyranids. He saw not a garden to be cultivated for its biological secrets, but a board to be swept clean of his opponent's pieces. Imhotep is perhaps the greatest military commander the galaxy has ever known. His mind is a flawless engine of strategy and logic, capable of processing billions of tactical variables and predicting his enemy's moves centuries in advance. He is possessed of a supreme arrogance born from an intellect that has simply never been matched. Where others feel fury in battle, Imhotep feels only a cold satisfaction in a flawlessly executed plan. He he is famous for his cruel mercy. He will often defeat a worthy commander only to spare his life and sever one of his limbs, leaving him with the humiliating knowledge that he was utterly outthought. He then ensures their next encounter is a final crushing annihilation, a clinical demonstration of his superiority. To a mind like this, the Silent King's quest for souls is a profound and frustrating distraction. It is a sentimental folly, a ghost hunter waste of precious military resources on a philosophical problem that has no bearing on the immediate existential threats facing their race. What use is a soul if your dynasty is consumed by tyrannids? What value is there in feeling joy if your tomb world is shattered by an imperial crusade? The Stormlord sees Jarek's vision not as a path to salvation, but as a strategic blunder of the highest order. The goal of Imhotep the Stormlord is therefore brutally simple, direct, and logical. It is the restoration of the Necron Empire to its former galaxy-spanning glory, not through subtle manipulation or grand esoteric projects, but through systematic, overwhelming, and total conquest. His vision is not of salvation, but of subjugation. For him, the current state of the galaxy is an intolerable disorder. The lesser races with their chaotic emotions, their pointless wars, and their fragile biology are a disease. The cure is a campaign of methodical extermination and annexation. His goal is to march his legions of the Sautek dynasty across the stars, to silence the prayers of the Imperium with Gauss fire to atomize the wage of the Orcs and to establish a new silent order upon the ashes of the old. The logic behind this grand ambition is from his perspective irrefutable. It is a matter of simple priority. The Necrons are immortal. They have an eternity to ponder the esoteric nature of the soul. What they do not have is a secure galaxy in which to conduct such research. Therefore, the primary and indeed only logical objective must be the establishment of absolute security. This security can only be achieved through total galactic domination. First, you eliminate all threats. You conquer every major star system. You dismantle the command structure of the Imperium. You shatter the Orc empires. You establish a cordon of dead worlds around the advancing Tyrannid fleets. You create a galaxy where the only sentient will is the will of the Necrons. Only then, once a final silent peace has been imposed by force of arms, can the Necrons afford the luxury of philosophy. Once every external threat has been permanently neutralized, once the resources of 1,000,000 worlds are at their beck and call, then perhaps the question of the biotransference can be revisited. If the Silent King wishes to use a pacified galaxy as his personal laboratory, Imhotep might even permit it. But to place this sentimental quest before the strategic necessity of conquest is to the Stormlord pure madness. His is the logic of the sword. The galaxy will not be saved by whispers of lost souls, but by the silent, inexorable tramp of immortal legions and the cold green light of orbital bombardment. His goal is not to heal the wound within the Necron heart, but to place an iron boot upon the neck of the universe until it stops struggling. In the fractured constellation of Necron ambitions, far removed from the grand galactic strategies of kings and conquerors, exists a goal born not of guilt or logic, but of an obsessive and infinite intellectual curiosity. This is the domain of Trazyn, the infinite overlord of the tomb, world of solemnness, and self-appointed chief archivist of the galaxy. Trazyn is not driven by a desire to save his people or to rule the stars. He is driven by a singular, all-consuming passion to collect. For solemnness is not a fortress world, nor is it a dynastic capital. It is a museum, a gallery of such impossible scale and scope that it dwarfs any other repository of knowledge ever conceived. Its corridors are timelines, its chambers are moments, and its exhibits are the stolen heartbeats of history itself. To walk the halls of solemnness is to witness a silent, frozen chronicle of the universe. In one cavernous gallery, the size of a continent, hangs the perfectly preserved skeleton of a Jorgal space leviathan, its bones still shimmering with the void energies that animated it in life. In another, a vast crystalline chamber holds the last rays of light from a star that died 10 million years ago, its final photon trapped in an eternal temporal loop. But Trajan's collections are not limited to the inanimate. His most prized possessions are his dioramas' perfect snapshots of history, populated by the original actors frozen in time by advanced stasis fields. Here a full company of the Catachan jungle fighters stands forever on the brink of an ambush, their faces a perfect tableau of grim determination. There an entire conclave of orc war bosses is locked in a perpetual argument, their bellowing rage silenced for all eternity. His most audacious acquisition is a near-perfect replica of the throne room of the High Lords of Terror, complete with a stasis-locked Adeptus Custodes warrior, his golden armor gleaming, captured in a moment of absolute, unwavering vigilance. Trajan's goal is not conquest, but curation. He views the universe not as a territory to be owned, but as a story to be read, and more importantly, preserved. Having witnessed the rise and fall of countless empires over millions of years, he has come to a simple, sobering conclusion. The universe is in its final act. The 41st millennium is not just another age of chaos. It is a climactic, frantic, and bloody finale before the curtain falls for good. The Tyranids, the forces of chaos, the endless green tide of the orcs, these are not mere antagonists, but the agents of universal entropy. In the face of this inevitable terminal decline, what is the point of empire? Why rule over a galaxy that is turning to dust, and why bother regaining a soul as the Silent King desires only to have it snuffed out with everything else? To Trajan, there is only one logical and truly meaningful course of action: to preserve a record. His ultimate objective is to create a perfect, incorruptible archive of the most significant moments, technologies, creatures, and cultures in galactic history. He is Noah, and solemnness is his ark, but he is not saving life from a flood. He is saving history from oblivion. When the rest of the universe has been consumed by war and entropy, when all the stars have gone out and only silence remains, the galleries of solemnness will endure a final perfect testament to everything that ever was. This quest dictates his every action, often in ways that are both horrifying and darkly comical. Trajan will appear in the midst of a cataclysmic battle, not to tip the scales, but because he wishes to collect a particularly fine example of a Space Marine chapter banner, or to acquire a Chaos warlord whose mutations are of particular historical interest. He is known to use surrogate bodies other Necron lords, onto whom he can project his consciousness, to go on these acquisitions caring little if the body is destroyed, so long as the artifact is secured. His agents are everywhere, trading priceless technologies for access to a forgotten world, or manipulating entire war campaigns to bring a desired exhibit within his grasp. To his victims he is a terror, a phantom who plucks them from time itself and condemns them to an eternity as a conscious but motionless statue. To Trajan he is simply a devoted historian, doing what any good curator must, ensuring the collection is complete before the museum closes for good. If the goals of Zarek Imhotep and Trajan represent grand species-wide philosophies, salvation, conquest, preservation, then the ambition of Orikan the Diviner represents something far more primal and perhaps far more dangerous: pure, unadulterated ego. Orikan is a cryptek of unparalleled genius, a master astromancer whose understanding of the cosmic dance is so profound that he can not only predict the future, but actively manipulate it. He does not see time as a river, but as a vast, shimmering web of possibilities. With a thought, he can perceive the consequences of a billion different choices, and with an effort of will, he can step back from a fatal blow or a tactical blunder, replaying the moment until he achieves a perfect outcome. This power has made him paranoid, arrogant, and utterly convinced of his own superiority. He is locked in an eternal, bitter rivalry with Trajan the Infinite, despising the Archivist's obsession with the past. To Orican, history is a corpse, a collection of finished irrelevant events. The only thing that matters is the future, and more specifically, his future. Orican looks upon the ambitions of his peers with utter contempt. The Silent King's quest to restore flesh and soul, a pathetic attempt to return to a state of biological weakness and chaotic emotion. Imhotep's desire for galactic conquest, a tedious and brutish exercise in logistics fit for a simpleton. Trazen's endless collecting, the hobby of a dusty old fool obsessed with trinkets. Orican believes that they all lack vision. They are playing for kingdoms or relics or the ghosts of their past while he is playing for the universe itself. His goal is nothing less than apotheosis. He was there when the Setan walked among them, and he saw the true nature of power. He witnessed what beings of pure energy untethered from the limitations of a physical body could achieve. But he also saw their flaws, their simple hunger, their short-sightedness. Orican knows he can do better. His singular life-defining purpose is to use his mastery of chronomancy and forbidden science to initiate one final transformation. He seeks to shed his necrodermis shell and elevate his consciousness into a state of pure energy, to become a true god, not of stars, but of reality itself. He does not wish to bargain with gods, serve them, or even imprison them. He wishes to replace them. This ambition dictates his every action, which are often inscrutable and catastrophic to those caught in their wake. Orican is a master manipulator of events on a cosmic scale, but his endgame is never territory or simple victory. He might engineer the destruction of an entire star system, not for any strategic gain, but because the precise chronoton emissions from the dying star are necessary to power a ritual of ascension. He might guide a rival Necron fleet into a hopeless battle simply to study the temporal paradoxes created by their annihilation. His battlefield is not physical space, but the timeline itself, and his troops are cause and effect. Orican's selfishness is absolute. He holds allegiance to no dynasty, no Pharaon, and certainly not to the Silent King. He is a mercenary of fate, offering his incredible precognitive abilities to any faction that can provide him with the resources or ancient technologies he needs for his next great experiment. He will serve loyally, predicting every enemy movement and ensuring flawless victories right up until the moment that his allies are no longer useful, at which point he will abandon them to their fate without a second thought, often having orchestrated their downfall from the very beginning. His goal is the ultimate expression of solipsism. He is the most important being in the universe because he is the only one smart enough to realize it. While others fight for the future of the Necron race, Orican fights for a future where the only race that matters is him, a future where he is no longer just a diviner of fate, but its sole author and architect. Not all Necron goals are born of ambition, logic, or even regret. Some are born of a sickness, a contagious madness that represents the utter collapse of purpose. This is the path of the Flayed Ones, and their objective is not written in star charts or dynastic decrees, but in the blood and viscera of the living. Theirs is the grim destiny of the Flayer Curse, the final spiteful act of a dying god. During the Great Rebellion against the Setan, one of the star gods, Liandugor, the Flayer was shattered by the Necrons. In his death throes, he unleashed a terrible curse, a spiritual contagion that would infect the very fabric of his destroyer's being. It was a disease of the soul's memory, a virulent madness that preyed upon the Necrons' deepest, most repressed trauma, the loss of their flesh. The Flayer virus is not a biological agent, but a data scourge that corrupts the core programming of a Necron's mind. It spreads like a creeping dread between tombs, a slow-burning insanity that can lie dormant for millennia before manifesting. A Necron afflicted by the curse begins to lose its grip on its mechanical reality. Their sensory inputs begin to betray them with phantom feelings. They are tormented by an all-consuming gnawing hunger, yet they have no mouth with which to eat. They feel a bone-deep, shivering cold, a chill that no external heat can warm, because its source is the icy void where their soul used to be. They look down at their own gleaming metallic limbs and see in their mind's eye only emaciated, rotting flesh. The curse tricks them into believing they are not machines at all, but living beings in the final agonizing stages of starvation and decay. From this delusion, a new and terrible goal is born. It is not a strategy, but a desperate, primal compulsion. The flayed ones are driven by a singular instinctual need to sate their hunger and to feel the warmth of life again. Since they cannot truly eat, they perform a grotesque pantomime of consumption. They are ambush predators, their necrodermis bodies contorted into a feral crouch, their fingers elongated into horrific claws. They fall upon their living victims with a ravenous fury, tearing them limb from limb. They will then attempt to gorge themselves on the raw flesh and blood, smearing the gore across their featureless faceplates in a sickening parody of a feast, a desperate attempt to quell the phantom hunger that gnaws at their sanity. To combat the ever-present cold, they engage in an even more horrific practice. They flay their victims carefully, peeling away their skin and wrapping the still warm sheets of flesh and sinew around their own metal bodies. They festoon themselves with these bloody trophies, draping them like royal vestments, believing that these gruesome cloaks will restore the warmth and substance they have lost. Their goal is to create a grisly masquerade of life. They seek to cover their cold metal truth with a warm biological lie. An army of flayed ones is a sight of ultimate horror, a legion of gore-drenched skeletons lurching through the battlefield, dripping blood and trailing viscera, their movements jerky and animalistic. They often emerge from strange pocket dimensions, gateways to a hellish charnel realm where their shattered god is said to reside, a dimension piled high with the flayed skins and broken bodies of countless victims. The tragedy of the flayed ones is perhaps the most profound in all the Necron race. While the Silent King seeks to reclaim life and Imhotep seeks to master it, the flayed ones are trapped in a waking nightmare, forced by their madness to commit the most abominable mockery of the very thing they crave. Theirs is the ultimate expression of the Necrons' loss. They are a constant, horrific reminder that when you strip away a soul, you are left with a hunger that can never be filled, a cold that can never be warmed, and a madness that can consume eternity itself. Amid the fractured goals of the Necron race, there exists a philosophy that is not a grand strategy, a personal ambition, or even a madness born of a curse. It is a conscious choice, a cold, deliberate embrace of utter nihilism. This is the creed of the destroyer cults, and their goal is the simplest and most terrible of all: the complete and total eradication of all sentient life from the universe. Where the flayed ones are driven by a deluded desire to imitate life, the destroyers are fueled by a pure philosophical hatred of it. This madness is not a contagion, but a choice, a final surrender to the despair of their eternal, soulless existence. For these Necrons, the hope of reversing the biotransference is a childish fantasy. Immortality is not a gift, but a sentence of unending, meaningless consciousness in a cold, unfeeling shell. This existential despair has curdled over the aeons into a pathological revulsion for everything they have lost and can never be again. They look upon the teeming, vibrant, messy galaxy and feel nothing but disgust. They see the passions of biological life, love, fear, ambition, faith as chaotic, irrational impulses. They see the cycle of birth, growth, and death as a pointless, ugly churn of organic matter. To them, life is the galaxy's original sin. It is a fundamental flaw in the fabric of reality, a source of endless noise, disorder, and suffering. And in their cold, logical minds, a flaw must be corrected. An error must be deleted. A disease must be purged. To this end, the followers of the Destroyer cult willfully modify their own bodies and minds, systematically erasing any lingering trace of their former Necrontier selves. Their goal is to achieve the perfection of a killing machine. A Necron warrior's standard form is to them inefficient, still too humanoid, too reminiscent of the hated flesh. So they begin to carve themselves away. Lockhust destroyers fuse their torsos to powerful repulsor platforms, sacrificing legs for the speed and stability of a mobile weapons platform. Skorpek destroyers transform themselves into horrifying three-legged engines of slaughter, their minds stripped of all higher thought and replaced with the burning ecstasy of the kill. Others become serpentine Ophidian destroyers, phase-shifting ambush predators, or lumbering Lockhust, heavy destroyers whose sole purpose is to carry the largest possible gun onto the battlefield. They are not merely soldiers. They are living weapons who see self-mutilation as a holy act of purification. The ultimate objective of the destroyer cults is therefore one of absolute purgation. They are not conquerors like Imhotep. They have no interest in ruling over lesser species. To a destroyer, a living slave is just as offensive as a living enemy. They are galactic purifiers. When their legions descend upon a world, they do not issue terms of surrender. They do not take prisoners. They begin at one pole and move to the other, methodically atomizing every living thing they encounter. They burn the forests, boil the oceans, and scour the continents until not a single microbe remains in the soil. Their work is not done until the planet is a sterile, silent sphere of rock and dust. Then, and only then, do they move on to the next star, the next cleansing. Their vision for the universe is the peace of the tomb writ large across the cosmos. It is a galaxy of perfect silence and order, a future where dead worlds orbit dead stars in mathematical precision, unburdened by the chaos and noise of life. It is the ultimate expression of control, a state of being where nothing can ever change, grow, or defy them again, because nothing is left. While other Necrons struggle with the legacy of what they lost, the destroyers have chosen to resolve the problem by destroying the very concept of life itself. Theirs is a war not against an empire or a species, but against the fundamental principle of existence, a grim crusade to impose the cold, silent, and dead perfection of their own souls upon all of creation. Beyond the grand galaxy-spanning ambitions of figures like Sharek, Imhotep, and Trazyn, lies the vast chaotic reality of the Necron race. It is an empire of 1,000,000 fractured kingdoms, each ruled by an overlord with their own unique and often bizarre goals. The destruction of the Silent King's absolute command protocols ensured that upon awakening, every Necron lord with a surviving personality would be his own master. The result is a patchwork of countless independent dynasties, each pursuing an agenda dictated by the whims, madness, or eccentricities of its ruler. These splinter goals, while perhaps not threatening on a galactic scale, make the Necrons an endlessly unpredictable and dangerous presence. A prime example of these independent actors is the renowned Anrakir the Traveler. On the surface, his goal appears noble, almost altruistic. Anrakir travels the void in his warship, the Pyrrhian Eternia, with a singular purpose to locate and awaken dormant tomb worlds. He is a uniter, a rouser of the legions, bringing his slumbering brethren back into the galactic fold. However, Anrakir's assistance is never free. He is a mercenary of resurrection, and he always demands a price for his services. Upon awakening a new world and its armies, he will levy a heavy tithe. Sometimes it is a cache of rare and powerful technology. Other times he claims the services of the world's most skilled cryptechs. Most often, however, he demands that a significant portion of the newly awakened legions swear fealty to him, not their Pharaon. These troops are then absorbed into his own ever-growing army. Anrakir's goal is a self-perpetuating quest for strength. He awakens others only to make himself more powerful, but to what end remains a mystery. Is he building a force to rival the great dynasties, or does he believe that only through his own supreme power can the Necron race truly be united? His goal is his own, his allegiance is fluid, and his growing power makes him a dangerous wildcard in the galactic game. For every methodical uniter like Anrakir, there are thousands of other overlords whose goals are far stranger, born from the corrupting influence of 60 million years of troubled sleep. The Great Sleep was not kind to the minds of the Necron nobility, and many have awakened, changed. Consider the overlord of a dynasty obsessed with aesthetic perfection. His goal is not conquest, but artistry. He might spend millennia commanding his canoptek swarms to reshape the continents of his world into a perfect crystalline fractal pattern. His legions are not soldiers, but paintbrushes commanded to march in endlessly complex patterns across the plains, a silent, pointless, and beautiful mechanical ballet for an audience of one. Elsewhere, an overlord might awaken to the cacophony of the 41st millennium and be utterly appalled. His goal becomes absolute isolation. He turns his system into an impenetrable fortress of esoteric defenses, a silent kingdom sealed off from the rest of the noisy galaxy. His warning to trespassers is the silent expanding debris field of any ship foolish enough to cross his border, whether it be Imperial Orc or even another Necron. His ultimate desire is to simply be left alone to preside over a kingdom of perfect, undisturbed silence for the rest of eternity. And then there are the truly insane, overlords whose minds have completely shattered. One might be trapped in a perfect memory loop of a glorious banquet from his life, in the flesh commanding his mindless warriors to attend him at an empty table, screaming at them for not partaking of the phantom feast. Another might still believe he is fighting the war in heaven, his legions waging a pointless, destructive war against the rocks and dust of his own world, which he mistakes for legions of the hated Old Ones. These mad kings are perhaps the most dangerous of all, for their actions have no logic, their goals are the fever dreams of a broken machine, and yet they command immortal armies and weapons that can still turn stars to dust. The Necron race is not a monolith. It is a deeply dysfunctional family of god-kings, tyrants, artists, hermits, and madmen, each pursuing a private dream of eternity. This profound disunity is their greatest weakness and the source of their terrifying unpredictability. To understand the goals of the Necrons is one matter. To comprehend the terrifying scale and methodology by which they intend to achieve them is another entirely. This is the realm of the Great Work, a term that encompasses not one, but many grand and terrible projects. For those who follow the Silent King's vision of salvation, the Great Work is the quest to reverse the biotransference. This is not a matter of prayer or hope, it is a cold scientific problem to be solved. A problem of metaphysics to be dissected with the tools of physics. A quest to quantify and engineer the human soul, and the laboratories dedicated to this task are among the most terrifying places in the galaxy. Deep within the sterile, silent catacombs of the tomb worlds, the cryptechs, the techno-sorcerers, and master scientists of the Necrons pursue this grim research. Their methods are devoid of the passionate cruelty of a Drukhari homunculus or the zealous butchery of a chaos warp-smith. Theirs is a far colder, more analytical horror. They capture specimens from the lesser races, humans, for their sheer abundance, orcs for their strange psychic gestalt, and the Eldari, who are prized above all for the sheer incandescent potency of their souls. These living, feeling beings are brought to silent operating theaters, where they are not merely vivisected, but deconstructed, their very essence unraveled thread by thread. The cryptechs seek answers to questions that should be beyond science. What is a soul? Is it a measurable quantum field? A complex pattern of bioelectrical energy in the brain, a resonant echo in the immaterium? To find out, they employ devices of esoteric terror, machines that peel back a creature's consciousness layer by layer while it is still alive, cataloging every memory and every sensation. Instruments designed to measure the precise release of psychic energy at the exact moment of death, attempting to capture the soul as it flees the body. They conduct horrific experiments in transference, attempting to siphon the consciousness of an Aeldari Farseer into a crystalline matrix, only to watch it dissipate into a scream of incoherent data. For the Cryptex, this is not torture. It is research. The subjects are not people. They are biological calculators, bags of components to be disassembled and analyzed in the hope of finding a single repeatable equation for the soul. Each failure, each life extinguished in a silent flash of green energy, is simply another data point in the largest and most terrible science experiment in galactic history. In this grim pursuit, the Silent King himself has directed much of the research towards one specific biological anomaly, the pariah gene found in humanity. Zarek's long history has instilled in him a profound hatred and fear of the warp. It was the weapon of his ancient enemies, the Old Ones, and it is the source of the Chaos Gods, a force of pure, destructive madness. He knows that simply returning his people to vulnerable organic bodies would be a catastrophic error. It would be trading the cold, clean prison of metal for a fragile, fleshly prison that could be corrupted, possessed, and driven mad by the whispers of the Imperium. He would not allow his people to escape one damnation, only to fall into another. The pariah gene presents the perfect, elegant solution to this problem. Humans born with this mutation are psychic blanks. They have no soul presence in the warp. In fact, their very existence creates a null zone around them, a bubble of silence that is unnerving to normal humans and agonizing to psychers. To Zarek, this is not a curse. It is the key to the next stage of evolution. If his Cryptex can isolate, understand, and replicate the pariah gene, they can engineer new bodies for the Necrons that are not only living and organic, but are also utterly immune to the influence of the warp. They could become a race of souled beings who are simultaneously a psychic void. This is the ultimate prize to return to life, but a life perfected, purified of the chaos that plagues the galaxy. This is why humanity is so crucial to his plans. He does not wish to exterminate the human race as Imhotep or the Destroyers might. He wishes to farm it. The Pariah Nexus, his great project of galactic pacification, is in part a colossal trawling net designed to control and subdue vast populations of humanity so that his Cryptex can more easily identify, abduct, and experiment upon those rare individuals who carry the key to his people's salvation. Humanity's strangest mutation may well be the blueprint for the Necrons' final form. The Silent King's ambition to reshape the galaxy is not a distant dream. It is a tangible, expanding reality. The primary tool for this grand and terrible project is the Pariah Nexus, a weapon of such scale and insidious power that it makes fleets and armies seem like crude, primitive instruments. It is not a weapon that destroys planets, but one that murders souls. Its expansion is not a fiery conquest, but a creeping, silent plague that leeches the very color and spirit from reality. The process begins with the activation of colossal blackstone pylons, strange monoliths that hum with a chilling anti-Empyrean energy. As their network expands, a palpable stillness descends upon vast swathes of space. The vibrant, chaotic energies of the warp are becalmed, then suppressed, then utterly negated. The very fabric of the galaxy is being rewritten. For the inhabitants of the Milky Way, the effects are catastrophic. Within the ever-expanding borders of the Nexus, the fundamental laws that have governed life for millions of years are being unmade. For a psyker entering the zone is to experience a fate worse than death. Their connection to the warp, a sense more vital to them than sight or sound, is violently severed. It is the psychic equivalent of being thrown into a sensory deprivation tank and having the air slowly pumped out. Astropaths who provide the Imperium's only means of faster-than-light communication are struck dumb, their minds filled with a terrifying, crushing static. The navigators who guide starships through the treacherous currents of the warp gaze into the Empyrean and see only a smooth, featureless, impenetrable wall. Ships are lost, fleets are stranded, and entire sectors of the Imperium are rendered isolated, deaf and blind, adrift in an unnaturally silent sea. For the great enemy, the forces of chaos, the Nexus is the ultimate anathema. The demonic legions of the Chaos Gods cannot manifest within its borders. The Empyrean energies that give them form are simply not there. The sorcery of 1,000 suns warband fizzles into nothingness. The blood-crazed rage of a Khorne berserker fueled by the warp dulls into a cold, confused anger. It is a sterile quarantine against the gods of emotion. But the effect is not limited to the psychically gifted or the eternally damned. For the trillions of ordinary human citizens, the Nexus is a slow poison for the spirit. It systematically drains away the strong emotions that are the bedrock of the human experience. Faith in the God Emperor becomes a hollow recitation of memorized words. Hope for a better future curdles into a gray, listless apathy. Ambition, love, hatred, and joy are all muted, their vibrant colors fading to a monotonous shade of despair. The human spirit is not broken. It is starved until all that remains is a docile, compliant husk, a perfect subject for the Necrons' cold, analytical rule. This reveals the terrifying dual nature of the Silent King's grand strategy. The Pariah Nexus is simultaneously the most effective weapon against chaos ever conceived, and the most perfect tool of galactic enslavement. Zarek, having witnessed the ruinous power of the warp in the War in Heaven, sees it as the fundamental source of all chaos and suffering. In his cold, mechanical logic, the only way to save the galaxy is to perform a cosmic-scale amputation to sever its connection to this cancerous dimension entirely. He is bringing his vision of perfect silent order to a chaotic universe, and in his mind, this is an act of benevolent purgation. But the order he imposes is the sterile, absolute order of the tomb. A galaxy without the warp is a galaxy without faith, without passion, without inspiration, and ultimately without free will. By turning entire populations into listless, spiritless automatons, he makes them easy to control, to experiment upon in his search for the pariah gene, or to eradicate without resistance. There can be no rebellion in a heart that feels no anger. There can be no crusade in a soul that feels no faith. The Silent King is saving the galaxy from the fiery, passionate damnation of chaos by inflicting upon it the cold, silent damnation of his own soulless existence. He is building a great wall of silence, a pariah nexus, and in his quest for redemption, he is forcing the rest of the universe to share in the very curse he is trying to escape. The peace he offers is the peace of the grave. The methods of the Necrons are not limited to the insidious and the esoteric. To enforce their will upon a defiant galaxy, they are also in the process of reclaiming the ancient and devastating superweapons that won them the War in Heaven. The current technological state of the Necron dynasties, while formidable, is but a pale shadow of their civilization's peak. Scattered across the void, lying dormant and often mistaken for natural phenomena, are artifacts of such power that they can unmake entire star systems. The most legendary of these are the Blackstone fortresses. These are not merely space stations or naval bases. They are mobile weapons of cosmic destruction, each one possessing more firepower than the combined fleets of an entire Imperial sector. Forged from the same psychically inert noctilith as the pylons of the Pariah Nexus, a Blackstone fortress is a star-sized citadel of impossible alien beauty. They are shaped like multifaceted crystalline stars, their surfaces a seamless expanse of black, obsidian-like material that seems to drink the very light of space. They were the Necrontyre's ultimate answer to the Old One's mastery of the warp. While their enemy wielded psychic energy, the Necrontyre would master the fundamental forces of the material universe. By channeling the energy of a captured star at its core, a Blackstone fortress can unleash a beam of such focused and unimaginable power that it can cause another star to go supernova. It is a weapon that does not destroy a fleet or a planet, but one that annihilates an entire star system wiping it from the galactic map in a single silent flash of celestial fire. After the Great Sleep, the knowledge to control these fortresses was lost, and they became dormant ghost stations occasionally occupied by lesser races who used them as simple fortresses utterly oblivious to the godlike power slumbering within. Now, as the dynasties reawaken, so too does the knowledge of how to command these ancient behemoths. The race to reclaim the Blackstone fortresses has become a new secret war, not only against the other races of the galaxy, but also between the Necron factions themselves. For a pragmatic conqueror like Imhotep, the Stormlord, a Blackstone fortress is the ultimate strategic asset. With a single such weapon, he could hold a gun to the head of the Imperium itself. He could park a fortress in orbit of a segmentum capital and demand the unconditional surrender of 1,000 worlds with the implicit threat of stellar annihilation. It is the ultimate tool of conquest and blackmail, capable of shattering empires and enforcing his will with brutal efficiency. For the Silent King Sarek, the fortresses serve an even grander, more sinister purpose. He understands their true nature as artifacts of Noctilith better than any other. They are not just weapons, they are colossal mobile amplifiers for his pariah nexus. Each fortress he reclaims and integrates into his network allows him to expand his soul-dampening field at an exponential rate. With a handful of Blackstone fortresses working in concert, he could potentially cast a net of psychic silence over the entire galaxy, pacifying all life and strangling chaos in its cradle. They are the keystones in the arch of his grand design for a silent, ordered universe. The reawakening of these fortresses marks a terrifying escalation in the Necrons' threat. The younger races have been fighting amongst the ruins of their elders for millions of years. Now the elders are returning, and they are remembering how to turn the lights back on. And the light they bring is the fire of dying stars. With such a vast and contradictory array of goals from salvation to annihilation, it seems impossible that the Necron race could ever act as one. Yet there is one force in the galaxy, so utterly alien, so absolute in its purpose, that it may be the only catalyst capable of forcing a temporary, unwilling unity. This force is the Great Devourer, the Tyranids. The conflict between the Necrons and the Tyranids is one of the most fundamental in the universe. It is a war between two perfect opposing absolutes, the pinnacle of synthetic lifeless order versus the pinnacle of evolving ravenous biology. From the Necron perspective, the Tyranids are the ultimate nightmare. They are a biological plague that threatens to destroy the very foundation of the Silent King's great work. Sarek's hope for his people's salvation rests on the study and manipulation of organic life in the hope of one day creating new bodies for the Necrons. The Tyranids do not conquer, they consume. They strip every planet of every last shred of biomass, leaving behind nothing but barren, sterile rock. They are systematically devouring the Necrons' only hope, burning the library that contains the cure for their condition. For the Necrons, a galaxy consumed by the Tyranids is a galaxy where their curse becomes truly irreversibly eternal. Conversely, for the singular consciousness of the Tyranid hive mind, the Necrons are a unique and infuriating paradox. The Tyranids' entire method of warfare is built upon consumption. They overwhelm their enemies, devour their biomass to refuel the hive fleet, and absorb their genetic material to adapt and evolve stronger bioforms. The Necrons deny them this on every level. Their bodies of living metal are inedible, offering no sustenance or genetic secrets. Fighting the Necrons is an exercise in pure attrition, a net loss of energy for the hive mind. They are an indigestible, pointless foe. This makes the Necrons perhaps the only race in the galaxy capable of fighting the Tyranid menace to a true standstill, a war between an unstoppable hunger and an inedible object. This unique symbiotic animosity presents the Silent King with his greatest political tool. The Tyranid threat is so existential, so absolute, that it can be used to override the personal ambitions of even the most arrogant overlords. It is the one argument that can bring a conqueror like Imhotep an archivist like Trazyn, and even the nihilistic destroyer cults to the same table. Zarek can approach his rivals not with pleas for unity, but with cold, undeniable logic. Your desire to rule the galaxy is meaningless if there is no galaxy left to rule, but barren rock. Your priceless collections are worthless if they are submerged in a sea of digestive acid. Your desire to kill all life will be rendered moot when a greater hunger does it for you. Faced with this reality, an unwilling alliance becomes the only logical course of action. Imhotep may join the war to test his strategic genius against the hive mind. Trazyn may see a unique opportunity to collect a perfectly preserved specimen of a Norn queen. The destroyers will gleefully join a war that promises slaughter on an unimaginable scale. It would be a fragile, temporary union, an alliance of convenience born of mutual desperation. But it would be a union nonetheless. In the face of the Great Devourer, all other goals become secondary. The quest for souls, the drive for conquest, the preservation of history, all must be put on hold. The ultimate goal of the Necron race for a time would shift from the philosophical to the primal. It would no longer be about salvation or damnation, but about the one thing that unites all beings in the face of oblivion survival. So we return to the question that echoed at the dawn of their awakening. What is the ultimate goal of the Necrons? After journeying through 60 million years of sorrow, after witnessing their fractured rebirth into a galaxy that is not their own, the answer reveals itself not as a single clear truth, but as a shattered mosaic of conflicting, irreconcilable ambitions. Theirs is not one goal, but a war of philosophies being waged in the silent courts of the dead, a conflict that will determine the fate of all life. There is no singular path, only a spectrum of tragic and terrible choices, a testament written in the ashes of their own souls. There is the path of redemption walked by the silent King Zarek. It is the grandest and perhaps most noble of their ambitions, a quest to undo the original sin of biotransference, to restore the souls of his people, and finally grant them the peace of mortality. It is a goal born of an agony of guilt that has spanned 60 million years, a desire to correct the greatest mistake in cosmic history. Then there is the path of dominion marched by the cold, logical mind of Imhotep, the Storm Lord. It is a goal of pragmatic conquest, a belief that order and security can only be achieved through the total subjugation of the galaxy and the extermination of the lesser chaotic races. It is a vision of a silent, perfect, and eternal empire. There is the path of preservation curated by the eccentric archivist Trazyn the Infinite. His is a goal born of a historian's obsession, a frantic attempt to catalogue and collect the last dying moments of a universe he believes is in its final act. And there is the path of apotheosis sought by the supremely arrogant Oricon the Diviner, a selfish quest for personal godhood, a desire to transcend all limitations and become the master of reality itself. And finally, there are the paths of oblivion, the descents into pure madness. The grisly masquerade of the flayed ones driven by a phantom hunger for the life they lost, and the nihilistic crusade of the destroyer cults who seek to answer their own despair by extinguishing the flame of all life in the universe. Salvation, conquest, preservation, godhood, madness, annihilation. These are the competing futures for the Necron race. But here lies the final, most profound tragedy of their existence. In their quest to correct their past, they are doomed to ruin the future for everyone else. There is no good path. There is no choice they can make that does not demand a price paid in the blood and souls of trillions. Consider even the noblest goal, that of the Silent King. His quest for his people's souls is paved with the most profound cruelty. It requires the slow, spiritual strangulation of entire sectors of the galaxy through the pariah nexus. It is fueled by the horrific clinical experiments performed on countless living, feeling beings. To regain the soul of a single Necron, he will sanction the harvesting of 1,000 human minds. To heal his own people, he must first break the spirit of all others. His salvation is a tyranny of the most insidious kind, and so it is for all their paths. Imhotep's promise of order is the peace of a boot, stamping on a face forever. Trazin's Museum of Eternity is for its living, exhibits a conscious hell of being frozen in a single moment of terror for all time. Every victory for a Necron overlord is a catastrophic defeat for some corner of the living universe. They are a paradox, a race of beings who are arguably the greatest threat to all life yet, whose every action is a distorted, tragic attempt to reclaim some semblance of that very same life. They traded their souls for a weapon to win a war, and now find themselves in an eternal war against the soulless weapon they have become. They cannot win. If they abandon their goals, they are doomed to an eternity of silent, hollow consciousness. If they pursue them, they must become the ultimate villains in the story of every other race. This is their curse. This is the corner into which their ancient pride has painted them. Let us return one last time to the image of a tomb world. It hangs in the void, a sphere of perfect geometric silence. On a vast obsidian balcony overlooking the star-strewn chaos of the Milky Way, a lone overlord stands motionless. He has been awake for 1,000 years. He has re-established his rule. His legions stand ready. His weapons are armed. He looks out at a galaxy tearing itself apart. The green tide of the orcs, the encroaching shadows of the Tyranids, the endless bloody crusades of the Imperium of man. He watches the vibrant, passionate, and fleeting lives of the lesser races burn brightly and extinguish all, while a cold, eternal, and unchanging void resides within his own metal chest. He feels no joy in his immortality, no pride in his power. He feels nothing. And in that nothingness, the true nature of his race's goal is finally understood. The ultimate goal of the Necrons is not a destination, but an eternal struggle against their own greatest mistake. A struggle in which the silence of a lost soul can echo louder than the roar of 1,000,000 wars.